Okay, guys, hello again. So we're still here with PD. It was like a few seconds ago we finished one episode. Now recording the next for you probably will be a month. Uh, But yeah, so all the way from San Diego, California, uh, and this episode we're gonna talk about PD's work with the Goths. Something I kind of looking very forward to it because I'm not a Goth and don't know so many Goths. And but at the same time, MetalCorps, metal that's here in Kent, something that is something that's in my heart to reach out to the Goths. But obviously, you're gonna need another Goth. So if you're watching your local and you're a Goth and you something that interests you, like be in touch, and we can see what we can do. So PD, Dave, over to you. So how the whole thing with the Goths came to be.
Well, if you didn't hear the other thing, I'm one of the earliest sanctuary uh, pastors, not sanctuary in terms of sanctuary movement. Sanctuary was a series of mission churches developed by Pastor Bob Beeman in America. I had started something like this and then joined with Bob to reach out to heavy metal kids. And I did that for 10 or 12 years. I spent about 5 years hanging out with punkers and punk clubs, and then a young lady and her then husband uh, came to me and said, uh,
It wasn't Cindy.
"Yes, it's Cindy, who has recently started attending um, uh, attending asylum." And
So Cindy, that's for clarity, just a mutual person
she
we
was,
know.
yeah, she's been a lifelong goth. She was like the only goth in her Bible kind of thing back in the 80s, before people understood, uh, or even aware that such a subculture even existed. But Cindy and her husband Ed came to me and said, "Look, uh, there's a whole nother subculture out there. The metal thing is getting crazy. We seem to have lost touch with some of that thing. We'd like you to come with us to some goth clubs and see if we could start a sanctuary style thing with goth kids. And we're going to show you where some of these places are and what's going on there." And I thought, well, I have no idea. I don't think. I mean, I spent a good part of my life in the 80s and early 90s uh, going around the country speaking, public speaking to churches and conventions about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I was very well studied on a wide variety of music issues, secular and Christian, and I pretty much talked to any kid uh, that I met uh, because we'd start talking about music, and that led into talks about life. It was my key to talking to young people. And so I figured I could kind of handle it, although I didn't know as much about goth music as I would have liked to at that time. But Cindy knew a lot. And um, there were just a couple of gothic groups starting to uh, move into the Christian music scene. So I wasn't really all that familiar with what was going on. It was pretty new. And started taking to me this club called Soil, um, downtown San Diego. And it was actually owned by a bunch of guys who had used it as a reggae club. But on Thursday nights, they decorated all with dark stuff and back, all this weird stuff, and it would be a goth club, and the kids would come, uh, would hang out in the parking lot, and then keep going in and out to dance to their favorite songs the whole night. It was really interesting, uh, but I soon realized I was not going to get a lot done inside the club because you couldn't hear yourself think with the music. But the kids would all come out to cool off outside, and there was this whole parking lot social thing going on. It started to be very interesting. And then I started slowly but surely meeting certain people. Um, and again, it was all just kind of this weird circumstantial kind of thing. There was a young lady during one of my early days there that uh, I had known. She had been brought to Sanctuary during the heavy metal days because her uncle was one of my most loyal kind of friends there. He had a couple of local Christian metal bands. He was a really good guy. I married him to his wife, did their wedding, and then one day he shows up with a niece. She's 19 years old. She can't remember if she'd already had a child by that time. She was stripping for a living down in the deal, and they were just trying to get her to, have a Christian focus before she ruined her life completely. She liked it well enough, but she never came back. But when I started going to the rock clubs, lo and behold, uh, she comes bursting out of the club going, "Oh, Pastor Dave, Pastor Dave." I haven't talked to this girl in like a year, but she's like, we were the best friends, kind of thing. And comes running out and going, "I'm just feeling so hurt and distraught. My boyfriend won't talk to me, and he's snubbing me in front of a group of people, and I just feel horrible," and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just going, okay.
How old were you at the time?
I started, let's see, I probably was getting close to 40, I think, and stuff. But the short hair didn't necessarily bother the goth kids, and I already had enough understanding. I went dressed pretty dark.
I think I'm asking purely because I mean, I knew probably would be about that age, but it's kind of making a point on because I think a lot of times when we working with like those kids is inevitably they might be looking for a father figure. And to become a father figure, you need to be of a certain age, inevitably. You can't be a father figure when you're like 25 to a
Right.
19-year-old because you.
Oh, I agree. And I was somewhere between, my early days at the club were somewhere between being a father figure and a bartender. And people were telling me all kinds of stuff and trusting me.
Let's say
But
you're old enough to be a father figure, but not too old enough not to tell you, like, to be their grandpa.
yeah, today it's a little more grandfatherly, but and again, my credibility was music. Kids would come up and challenge me about bands and things like that. And the funny thing was, uh, probably the band I got most challenged about is they'd go, "Well, I bet I know a band you don't know." Christian kids would do this to me at Christian schools, and guys would do it to me at the clubs, and they'd go, "I know a band you've never heard of. They're way underground, and you're old and you wouldn't know this band." And it would be Savior Machine every time. And
Really?
just going, "Oh, you mean my best friend Eric up in San Bernardino here, where I go hang out with him in his black garage?" And so, "You know Eric Clayton?" And so that was my credibility half the time I talked to these kids, that I knew Savior Machine. And eventually I knew Eva O and a bunch of other people who had credibility in the Gothic community, and they were friends of mine. And that gave me a lot of credibility in the deal. Despite my age, I actually ran in the circles that these kids wanted to run in. And that that came in handy a lot of times because it gave me credibility enough for them to risk talking to me about personal things. So this girl comes out and she's like, "This is where I learned about how many drama queens there are in the Gothic scene." Okay? It was just crazy. So I'm going, okay. She goes, "You have to talk to him and make him be my boyfriend again and stuff." I'm going, "Well, that's not why I'm talking to him, but I'm interested to see who this guy is that has you." Well, I get there, and this guy's a little bit older, for one thing. She's like 19, 20, and he looks to be well into his 30s and a little younger than me, but one of the older guys. And he turns out to be one of the guys that virtually started this club and started this scene at this club. His name is Brandon, and uh, developed an instant like for each other. It was just an instant friendship and stuff. He considers himself a universalist minister kind of thing, but he dabbles in some really pretty much on the edge stuff and things. But he was core to the scene. And after reading Hill's the Celtic way of evangelism, I realized, getting in the core guys is part of what makes this kind of thing work. And it turned out that I gained the favor of a lot of club owners. They liked Sanctuary going there because there was a whole different vibe when Sanctuary was there. The kids relaxed. They weren't as dramatic. There were no fights. There was just a friendly atmosphere, and kids actually enjoyed their time at the club when Sanctuary was there, because we were engaging all the kids in friendly conversation and all of this kind of thing, and they just they liked us being there. It gave them some security, and that they were accepted, and all of this kind of thing, and we fed by about as much as we could. And they just had better club nights when we were there. I didn't find this out for a long while, but I thought there was going to be conflict all the time. Actually, my biggest concern was that one of the bigger churches in town, who were still reading people the Four Laws booklets and stuff, were going to come in, find out about our ministry, come in and take over and say, no, well, we'll show you how to do evangelism. I was scared to death somebody was going to another ministry was going to try to run us out of there. Not scared to death, but I just...
So like becoming antagonistic or something.
Yeah. Just being exactly what these kids were trying to avoid about Christians. And we were exactly the opposite. And so this guy and I just instantly gone, and through our first conversation, we had the weird coincidence of, it turns out we both have the same name. Brandon's last name is Hart. And he got out his ID, and I got out my ID and stuff, and we realized we had the same last name, which was just a cracker.
Smith.
And we spent, we thought it was a great joke, and we spent the next 6, and people knew Brandon. Everybody knew Brandon. They didn't know who I was, but we went around the entire club all the time telling people we were brothers. They're going, no, you've never been a brother and stuff. And we get out our IDs and show our IDs, and everybody believed we were actual, literal, eternal brothers because our last names were the same, and we could prove it. And
so was his surname Smith as well?
Yeah. If I had met a Schmidt, that would have come in handy as well. And it could have been my long lost brother. I don't know. So it turned out that this girl was a drama queen. It turned out that the situation was completely misrepresented by her. In fact, he pointed to me, he brought his phone out and said, during the conversation, I mean, explaining everything, he brought his phone out and showed me what he had in his phone for her number, and he just listed her as Satan. And it was the relationship from hell. He never wanted to be with her. He broke up with her like 8 months before. Had not talked to her or seen her in that entire time, and she is agonizing about how her boyfriend isn't paying attention to her. And I'm going, I think that ship has sailed, dear, but she's not clued in at all. And it was one of those hangers-on kind of thing and stuff. She had some growth issues and stuff. But Brandon kind of opened the door up to me to doing a lot of things. And then there was another kid named Vlad. Vlad, Brandon and I still talk to each other. I don't know what happened to the girl, but Brandon and I still talk to her. And we were like best friends for a long, long time. And then COVID kind of took us in different directions. Vlad was this guy who had been raised as a Christian, one of the guys I found who had been raised as a Christian. Christian, but was so into the music scene. Even as he was into heavy metal as well. He was the harder side of goth, but his favorite artist was King Diamond. Uh, if he had an overarching thing, he liked the gothic scene. He liked the dark stuff, the makeup, the other personas. Uh, but last problem, he thought I was the coolest thing that a Christian would even come into the scene. And he still considered himself a Christian, even though he really didn't know any Christians anymore. But and that's okay. But he just thought I was the greatest thing. But he thought it was very brave of me, and he would run around the clubs introducing me to a lot of the other kids. Uh, by introducing me as Van Helsing, the Vampire Slayer. I had to stop him. Yeah, it was really awkward. Going, I'm not here to kill any vampires. I am here to talk to these kids and make friends with them and be confident, if they will, and stuff. And he started talking to me about things, and it was really crazy. Well, let's go back a little in history and stuff, and let me summarize simply that the goth scene was in America is very definitely a byproduct of the goth scene that developed in England, and particularly influential was the Batcave scene in London, which where everybody who was anybody showed up. Bauhaus, Cramps, Alien Sex Fiend was a mainstay there at that club. The Cure would drop in and out. Depeche Mode to a little bit of a degree once in a while later. Susie and the Banshees, all the popular bands went in and out of the Batcave, and they created a motif and a thing there.
So you think like the goth scene has new wave influence?
Yeah, it was a new wave thing, but if you look at Bauhaus and some of the other bands, it really came even more directly, I think, out of the punk scene. And it was a sarcastic mockery of the disco scene. They decided to be morose and wear black instead of all these bright, happy, trippy colors, which they just thought was so fake and so elusive, that they decided to just do something the opposite of what everything was that was happy disco. So they wore black. They sung mournful songs. And when Bauhaus came out with Bela Lugosi's Dead, which was a much bigger hit in England than it was in America, let's just say it that way. Then the vampire motif was added, and they all went around in capes and doing all this and thinking being vampires and the undead. And because Bela Lugosi is dead, we have to carry on his legacy. And it really prompted a whole thought fashion style thing that went with it, as well as the music style. And that's why in the new version of Wednesday, the offshoot series from the Addams Family, her use of the cramps to do her little famous dance in that one
Yes,
episode.
she was saying she was studying like early goth early goths, isn't it?
Wednesday was part of what kids were fashioning from the very earliest days of the Goths took on to the Munsters. They took on the Addams Family, those kinds of images in horror movies that were really being spoofed because it was all tongue in cheek for them early on. And they just loved all that imagery. And Wednesday Addams was the first prototypical kind of goth. And
So let me stop you. That's because as you're talking about this, kind of have this thought, and just I want to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think because like the Adams family especially, it was like that family, the the oddballs, and they don't fit anywhere, they're weird, and they're so like wearing black, and the whole family so grim. But they're happy that like they're happy with their own world and they have that they're in their own way they're a loving family with loving friends. So do you think that was kind of making those kids feel like finding something like oh you know I would like to be this way, be weird, but don't fit anywhere, but I can still be happy and not fit anywhere.
I think it motivated that a lot. They were very underground. They were relatively exclusive, and once Goths get together with Goths, they feel like they're finally in an environment where they're going to be accepted. The Goths were always teased. And you can go back to the image of Ali Sheedy in the Breakfast Club as being a proto-Goth, the type, hiding behind her hair, her sleeves all up, although that was kind of an
Yeah.
emo thing too, and all of that. But Wednesday in the TV series was another one, and Winona Ryder's character in Beetlejuice was totally gothic, and to some degree, a lot of the stuff in the media was influenced by the Heathers, an old movie about high school witches. Um, Kids got their imagery from this a lot, but they thought if they could find a bunch of other people who are like this, then uh, they could get out of the mainstream and out of the bullying, the teasing, and the stuff, and be happy. And that's what they did. Gothic girls tended to get, in America, tended to get off together with a couple of other gothically inclined girls and go sit in corners at high schools and malls and read poetry to each other. And sometimes read their diaries to each other, which is not unusual for teenage girls to do, but they only did it with certain kind of girls that they thought would understand. Uh, and that became uh, uh, quintessential to my understanding of the whole goth community. They got into these dark, late night, underground things where they knew nobody would see them with other like-minded people. Teenagers have always done this, and felt they were in their own environment. They were in a place that was safe, which was actually a key element to one of my stories with a gal who was coming up to me all the time, asking me questions when I first got there. She would come up and predecess it. A couple of the other kids did too, but this gal particularly would go, I had this pastor yelled at me and told me I was going to hell for wearing black fingernail polish. Is that true? I heard you were a Christian pastor. Is that true? And the kids were actually, first thing I realized is these kids were actually, some of them have been in scenarios where they were actually waiting for me to yell at them. Because the rumor got around really quickly that I was some kind of a Christian leader or pastor guy. And kids would come up and kind of test me and stuff. And they'd go, is that true that I was told I was going to hell because I pierced my ears and I have, whatever kind of earrings or posts or whatever I've got in there. And I've got piercings, so I'm going to hell because of that. And my first question was, who the heck are these pastors yelling at these kids? I was at an underage club, which was supposed to be 18 and up, but a lot of kids even younger than that snuck in. And it wasn't a really big deal from, other than curfews, because the underage clubs didn't serve alcohol. Some of the kids came preloaded before they got to the club, but they didn't serve alcohol at the club. So it was legal for them to come a little bit underage. So I'm dealing with a lot of 18-year-olds and up.
So
But
it was you said it was a dry club, then you didn't have.
yeah, it was a dry club. It was mostly about the music for them.
I think a lot
And
of the early raves were like this, isn't it? They were dry.
yeah, yeah. These days, yeah, if you're going to keep the club legal, you could do that. But the kids don't mind to some degree, or they go do their drugs before they come to the club, and then there's no worry about the illegality. But this little girl just kept coming up and saying, "This pastor yelled at me, and what are we doing?" So one day she goes, "All right, do you think there's anything wrong with astral projection? So, well, that depends, dear. What do you mean by astral projection? What is your experience with this? Need to find out where the figure's at, rather than just going off on it. And she goes, well, I do astral projection, and I met this spirit being, and he's really, really nice to me, and he's really encouraging, and he's my friend, and he tells me good things about myself, and I feel really comfortable with him. But some people tell me I'm going to hell for doing this kind of stuff, and I just don't see it. The spirit being I'm connected with is really nice, and I'm going, well, that could be. However, let me put it this way: have you ever come to the club and seen a CGB, that's cute goth boy, for you uninitiated in the goth and scene stuff, and seen one of these guys, and he really thinks you're cute, and he comes and starts talking to you and telling you how gorgeous and sweet and nice you are, and then you go home with him and you sleep with him, and then you come back to the next club looking forward to seeing him, and you find out that he's been talking smack about you behind your back ever since you went home with him. And he's telling everybody that you're a slut and that you're easy, and anybody wants to sleep with you, you're the girl, and all this kind of stuff, and it really hurt your feelings, and you never talk to that guy again. And she goes, that happens to me all the time. I said, well, my first piece of advice is stop. But see, here's the problem with that scenario. You come to the goth clubs because you think everybody in the goth club is just like you, that it's a safe place. They dress like you, they like the same music, they understand. And you're coming here to make friends and be with people that you can be safe with. But like every other community, there are some bad people in it, and there are some good people in it. And you still have to make those distinctions. There are some predators here that I'm on the lookout for. There are just guys who want to use women, and it doesn't matter what community you're in. You're going to find these kind of people in every community you go in. And you're just going to have to learn to be more discerning. My feeling about astral projection is the same. I understand that there are good spirits out there. Sometimes we call them angels. And there are bad spirits out there, and we call them demons. Problem is, the bad spirit, just because it's a spirit, doesn't make it automatically good. And the bad spirits are going to come and try to make you think that you're wonderful and beautiful, and they're going to compliment you, but they're going to end up using you. And so I would be very, very cautious about this process. Well, my friend Brandon, he never came to Sanctuary and doesn't claim to be any sort of a Christian at all, has said, yeah, I tell kids the same thing. I've done astral projecting, and I've met the demons. I know they're demons. I know they exist. I've met them. I fell out of them, and I don't encourage any of the kids here.
I have a friend that he was doing this, and he was telling me. I mean, he was doing it before he became a Christian. After he became a Christian, he stopped it. He was doing it while he was his first days, and he stopped it because he was saying like he had like very serious, really bad experiences. But yeah, I mean, probably now also like a bit skeptical with those things, but at the same time, when you're hearing experience from people that they're clearly saying they're not nutters, it kind of like puts you into like, you know.
Well, this is a key part of Eva O's testimony as well. If you read anything from her, I was supposed to help her put out a few more biographical kinds of things. I wrote some stuff up in Heaven's Metal magazine and a couple of other places, but Eva and I got to be good friends when she was starting to work with Eric on his record company and putting out Eric from Savior Machine, and for MCM Records, for whom I was the official chaplain for that record company. I was specifically asked by Eric to be a chaplain for the MCM thing. And German partners agreed. They liked the fact that I was actually German. When I walked into our first meeting and said, "Wie geht's?" And they go, "Oh, we like this guy already." Okay, so it helped. But Eva and I talked about her initial experience, and she had been, of course, with Christian Death and went through a lot of trauma after uh, her
Christian
husband.
Death band.
Yes, she started out as a background vocalist and ended up marrying. Why am I spacing on his name? Somebody's yelling it. I can hear it during the thing.
And
I'll
they're
get
still
it.
around. I was never into them, but I knew them as a band. Like they're
Well,
playing around like Goth.
they're not around. He died. I think it was suicide. And Eva was just really destroyed by it. But they had a side project besides Christian Death, which was probably one of the three more occultic punk bands out there, but got more associated with the goth scene later. That, the Misfits, and the 45 Grade, all overtly, their imagery was overtly occultic. That doesn't mean they necessarily practiced, but she did. They got into a side project called Shadow Project, and she and her husband did little ceremonies and called up demons all the time. And she got into a place where one of those demons actually showed up, sat on her chest, she said. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't do anything. She was literally attacked by one of the demons she was playing with, and thought she was in control. And she barely squeaked out one word and cried out Jesus, and the demon disappeared. And it was the beginning of her thing going, I got to stop doing this. I got to start figuring out my Christianity. And Eric and I had sort of come by her side during her Halo project and stuff, and talked to her a lot. And we were all friends, and that was part of our ministry, was to encourage her to get rid of these backgrounds. But it was that kind of demon stuff, astral projecting kind of thing that turned her around as well, having bad experiences with it. Another one of my favorite stories, though, is more psychological. You'll enjoy this one. I actually was going to a Christian punk show. There was a punk club. These guys were Christian punkers, but they hung out with all the regular punkers, of course. In town, there weren't that many Christian punk bands. So they went where all Christian punkers played. And they were on this bill, 4 or 5 bands there. And I went that night to go backstage and pray with the punk band and encourage them, because they were everybody else was a secular group. I'm looking, and I notice when I'm going in the line before they go in, and there's this girl that is very distinctly a gypsy punk style dress, not typical punk at all. I thought, well, that's interesting. But then again, there are some crossovers between the goth and the punk and stuff. So I went in, I talked to my friends in the band. I'm still friends with the leader of the band. I go to his new shows all the time, and we hang out. In fact, I think we're going to go see Moral Decay together later and stuff, which is an offshoot of Undercover, the Christian punk band Undercover. And so a lot of these kids are still my friends. That's why I know my ministry is valid. But I went outside again to get a breath of fresh air, and there's this girl sitting on the sidewalk all by herself. And I went over and sat on the sidewalk with her gypsy punk look. And I said, how come you aren't with your friends? And she goes, oh, I came to this show because my friends told me I'd really like the music, but I don't like this kind of stuff. I don't know why I made this mistake of assuming. But she goes, I'm really into bands like this, and maybe it's because she mentioned one Christian goth band in this band she liked, and I'm going, there's a lot of Christian goth bands out there that you could get into as well. And we always just try to start the conversation with music. She goes, oh, uh, I'm not a Christian. God doesn't love me, and I don't love him. And I'm going, why would you think that? She goes, you know, uh, well, it's because my dad says I'm fat and ugly and I'll never amount to anything, which is basically the same thing I've heard with almost every kid that ever came to Sanctuary, or every kid I've ever talked to who was really going through issues. And she goes, sometimes, and so I know God doesn't love me, and sometimes uh, when I'm just walking along and I see a beautiful flower, I just want to stomp on it. And I start maybe edging a little bit more away from her because I think maybe she's going to stomp on me now. And I go, why would you do that? And she goes, because I hate beautiful things because I'm ugly. And beautiful things make me feel bad about myself. And I'm going, oh my God, this kid's got out really going through things. And I went through a short thing with her, um, with uh, with a thing of going, I'm really sorry that your father said that to you, but it sounds to me like you need a new father. And I'm telling you right here and right now, your heavenly Father would never say that to you. Didn't create you with that idea in mind. You really need to consider uh, spending some time talking to your Heavenly Father and getting to understand how much He loves you and that it's okay to love yourself and accept yourself. And she seemed to actually accept that answer. We got interrupted and she went off, went back with her friends, and we never saw her again. And I get criticism. You didn't greet her the gospel. You didn't get Jesus right into the deal. And
Not
so,
people see the spray, yeah.
yeah, no, sometimes it's about planting seeds, remember? And I want her to be a Christian who's good to her and kind to her. I want her to understand an image of a father who can love her. She needs to get to those kind of things as part of her journey. And she
This
feels
is very interesting what you're saying, and I'm kind of reflecting about on my spiritual journey. It was, and it was since the early days of my faith. I mean, now looking in retrospect, I realize I was deconstructed from day one. But in a lot of cases, it was God that he was deconstructing my own faith. Because as you say, like why you didn't this, so everything that was happening in my own journey was happening out of the ordinary. I, I don't want to say out of the ordinary, but out of the script. So say like I will do this when I'm in church because those things happen in church, and then God will meet me in a completely different setting. So it was like I was primed since early days to probably do what I'm doing now, so, like finding God in the most awkward and weird places.
yeah, it, it amazed me how many of those things. And even as I'm doing weddings now, and I do a lot of weddings with non-Christian people, because I'm just out there as a general officiant. But I'll get into spiritual discussions with all of these people, and it's kind of my friendship evangelism thing. But we'll talk about that those same kind of issues about how people were built up. And I heard this a lot from uh, Christian goth kids too, all over the country and stuff. Eventually, I got online with Christian goths and stuff, but. And my first, I went to I started getting online with all of these kids, and I started meeting kids around the country who were in these Christian Goth things. But my first face-to-face was with a couple of Bible school students who I'm still all acquainted with. And uh, they all lean towards a Gothic thing. And I had never met Gothic Christians before, but I was going to this conference, and I went to the campus of this Christian school and hung out for a whole afternoon with these kids. It was one of the best experiences I ever had. And them too, it was so affirming that there was finally a guy who got Goth and stuff. The young lady ended up doing her senior year. She had to do an internship with some ministry, and she came. And I think this was Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, was where this Bible college was, and completely on the East Coast and stuff. She came all the way out to California and lived with my wife and I for 3 months at our little apartment, and did on practice in Gothic ministry, and we talked about evangelism, made her write certain papers about evangelism strategy with Goth, and all of this kind of thing, and then, of course, gave her an A. But she came to the clubs with me, and she really got out of her little, her church culture dynamic to get out in the world and did something really, really different. And she's got kids who have all gone subculture on her and stuff like that. She kind of knows how to deal with them now, and interesting things. But I still talk to Angela all the time, and I did her wedding as well. But I get in these conversations with people about these kind of things with weddings, and uh, they would just go, they're kind of there right on the border, and they're going, this is amazing talking to you and your background and your experience and stuff like that, and that you actually understand. I don't expect this from church people and all of this kind of stuff, and I just keep telling them it's a God thing. That's the quickest, jokest way to say it, because it is. I think God puts people in front of you and you in front of people when it matters to him, that he actually engineers that. The rest is just life. But if you go out there, you're going to find things. If you stay huddled in your little circle, you're not going to have these
the way I see
God
it
moments.
is God puts opportunities. Sometimes puts opportunities in front of you, and it's down to you to, what you're gonna do with them. And not necessarily like within like the gospel work, like in anything, like your work, your friendships, like, because I don't think like it's all about sharing the gospel. Sometimes those opportunities, because cares about you and offer like a job opportunities that you still have to write your CV and go for an interview and do your best.
And again, I think my advantage is just having been in and around music scene, both Christian and secular, for so long, that I'm able to make connections relatively quickly over music and stuff. And as we're going here, those of you that are listening and stuff, if you don't know any, or you have a goth kid in your life and you want to start making connections, I always encourage them to get into the Christian stuff first, so they don't have to wade through the other aspects and things. But Savior Machine is not the only Christian band. It's probably one of the preeminent ones. But one of the other groups from the record company that came out of the record company was Wedding Party, and they just put out, just this week, put out a brand new album. I went to Christian Festival last year and met Angel Machine. Really nice guys. Let me see, who else am I thinking of? Scott, uh, what's it? Now I got to think of dance and stuff, but it'll all come to me. I really am getting old. And it's not so much that I go blank. I have so many thoughts at the same time in my head because I'm old and ADD that some thoughts crowd out the other thoughts, and I gotta shove things back in the closet so I can get back to the other thing. I'll mention some other bands later. Um, Two more stories that one was and this is going to sound like, again, like self-validation, but I take it as God validation and stuff. I had these two guys come up to me. Uh, well, that's actually two different stories about this. I had one guy who came up to me. Usually when I go to the club, I don't go in first. I start going around the different groups, saying hi to friends if I see them. And Goths parking lots tend to just kind of like Christians in parking lots, actually. The youth groups all do this kind of stuff. They end up standing in a circle and just talking and talking and talking with like 10 people in the circle and stuff. And it just goes on forever because everybody's got a bunch of stuff to say. And the Goths do that to some degree as well. And we had a couple, there was a couple of three sisters whose last name was Purdy, P-U-R-D-Y. But we called them the Pretty Sisters. And they were a little suspect of me when I first came, but I kind of won them over, and it helped that I realized with the Purdy Sisters and some of the other ones, you could start conversations if you carried some little chocolate kisses or something like that in your pockets kind of thing, and pass them around. I was the Altoid king for a long time. Altoids was a great one-step evangelism process, but which actually worked for me once. I went one night and I couldn't find anybody I knew. So I just walked into a circle of Goths who probably knew about me, but I hadn't really met personally or talked to any of these kids. I pulled out my box of Altoids. It's a mint if you don't have them in England. And I turned to the person to me, handed him my box of mints after I took mine out, and said, Altoid, they're curiously strong, which is their theme. Everybody knew that and stuff, and everybody laughed and just started passing around the thing. It broke the ice, literally, and I was part of the group. Just using Altoids. It was instant evangelism in the sense that complete strangers, and all of a sudden I wasn't a complete stranger anymore. But I usually carry little pieces of chocolate for the Purdy sisters, and they were always excited for me to come and do chocolate and chit-chat, and they were very teenagery in those days, but very cute, very sweet, and this guy was in this group when I approached this group with the Purdy sisters and stuff. It was brand new. I'd never seen him before. Had short hair, and I thought maybe he was Navy, but he had been a Goth, and so he was looking for Goth clubs to hang out. But he was actually, assigned to the military because he had a military-style haircut, and he just jumped at me. He's going, "You're that Christian pastor guy, aren't you? Well, I just want to tell you, we don't need any of that crap here and stuff. We're Goths, and we don't believe in any of this crap, and you can just go back and molest altar boys where you came from."
That escalated.
I didn't say anything. He didn't know who I was and stuff. And so the minute he said that, my first thought was to come at him and say, well, actually, I'm a Protestant and not a Catholic, and if you don't know the difference, we're not going to have a very intelligent conversation kind of thing. Kind of try to intellectually authoritize it down for a really stupid remark and stuff. Didn't get a word out of my mouth. The Purdy sisters and a couple of the other girls in that thing start going at him like a bunch of hens guarding a hen house. They just went, "Who do you think you are? That's Pastor Dave. He's our friend. He's not who you think he is. We love him, and he's never been mean to us. And you don't know what you're talking about, and you don't even know anything about this club." And they just went after him. And he's looking like he's expecting to be the hero, defending the Goths kind of thing against the evil Christian. And my girls just tore him apart. And he got very quiet, and I knew he was getting real silent and very humbled because he realized two things. One, the wrong guy to pick on, and two, he was not going home with any of those girls tonight. And he just totally ruined his reputation, right, in one thing. But it was so fun to watch them defend me, even though one of them I became a longer-term friend with, but I never got any of those girls to go to Sanctuary. But my ministry was there in the thing, and they loved me for that because I gave them value and worth, and they were willing to defend me. It was
something of what you
hilarious.
said. I saw it when I was working with homeless addicts. That was in Greece, and so there was like some people that would try to get them saved, quote
Right.
unquote, get them to the church. But my goal was never this. I mean, initially, because it was my first uh, experience with people that the less I don't know how I don't know to call them something like maybe less privileged or the homeless. And so after I got through my saviorism, I got rid of that. It was never about like taking them to church or like save them, but is what you say, like meeting them where they were, and actually it was very interesting because you could see how they will change just by like being there and being there for them and treat them like human beings basically. And I think it does something to people.
Exactly. And I learned that lesson early in uh, my Christian life and stuff. Uh, I ended up uh, going with a friend to visit a downtown ministry in the old days, the old soup and salvation type of ministry and stuff, where homeless people would come in. The homeless problem is
It was a Salvation Army
way beyond that. I don't think it was Salvation Army.
because
I
you
think it
said
was,
Super Salvation.
yeah,
That was
that's,
William.
it's also the name of a song by Maria McKee because her parents were Pentecostal ministers when she had experienced the soup and salvation kind of thing. This was an independent downtown, but it was basically the same mentality. They'd let them come in and provide them a meal, but they had to listen to a sermon first, kind of thing. And this guy had come in, and he was still, you could tell he was still under the influence. He was slurring a little bit and stuff like that. And they go, we love you, and we're going to feed you, and we want to do all this stuff. And this drunk homeless guy stood up in the middle of this beginning of this sermon thing going, you don't love us. You might feed us once in a while, but you don't love us. And it was like uh, he was almost more perceptive. But he picked up the vibe of just how fake this was because he knew they were going to go home to their comfortable homes and spend 2 hours with these guys and then go back to a very safe environment. And it was, they knew it. They didn't live in the city. They didn't live with them. They did not go up
I mean,
next
even
to
if you
them.
don't live with them, I think the whole idea, because I spend a lot of time with them. Uh, you're in the middle of drug dealing. You're just sitting there. Someone suddenly starts dealing drugs. And it's like you just sit there. You know, you meet them when they're like at their own context, not like within like the ministry. I think that's what creates like this alienation because like you're there in your building and we come to you and that you go. And personal thing, but a lot of times is they try to appease God that's never happy. Try to do this, like to keep God happy. Because if we don't keep God happy, something something bad will happen to us.
Yeah. but that's doing it out of fear.
It's dishonest, is the
Yeah, yeah, it's still you don't love them and stuff. But um, that I had another guy that was actually this was started by two guys, but there was this guy that was really antagonistic to me off and on, and another guy. I never saw the Navy guy again either. That's way. But there was a guy that had been antagonistic to me on and off over a period of weeks, and then one day he showed up with his friend, and apparently his friend uh, was really smart about Bible and theology, and he's going to rip your faith apart, and he's going to show you why you're full of crap, and all this kind of stuff. And he's egging on his friend to get into this debate and show this guy that he's stupid and all this stuff. And for all the world, the image that was going on when he was doing that is that one is that image in the Christmas story, the one with the boy that wants the red BB gun, Red Ryder BB gun, and there's the little guy egging on the big guy with the Davy Crockett hat to beat up all the little kids, but he himself is not beating anybody up. And that little guy that egged this guy on disappeared. I don't remember ever talking to him again. But I started this series of debates with this guy who knew about stuff, and he asked some pretty pertinent questions, and but kind of typical, and that, and we talked for about 20 minutes out on in front of the club, and he came back the next week and said, uh, "I've been thinking about what you said all week, and I still think you're full of crap because of this and this and that." Trying to get angry and get off on me, and I'm just sitting there smiling. He's going, "What are you smiling about? I'm tearing you to pieces here." And I'm going, "I'm smiling because I heard all I needed to hear." Yeah, then it said, "I thought about this all week. I realized I attained my goal."
I win.
I don't intend to convert you or do anything in 1 week and stuff. But if you're thinking about it, then I said something that made a difference.
Yeah.
And he was debating in his head all week about it and getting prepared the next week to do it. So I pushed a button there somewhere.
Yeah.
After a couple of months off and on and doing these debates, he actually moved out of the area. Before he did, he goes, and this is one of the guys I had a hard time with because one of the first guys that I usually start with a more generic concept a lot of times where everybody believes in love, because the concept is that I've never seen God, and so I can't believe that he exists. And I usually go, yeah, but everybody believes in love. Everybody wants to fall in love. People want to get married. Everybody is trying to find love. Everybody expects their family to love them. Everybody believes in love, but you can't see that. And that, at least, even if they don't want to agree with that, at least it spurs the conversation. That it's possible that things that you can't handle in your hands is more in life than the material world. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so I thought I'd start with that logic with him, and then he flat out told me he didn't believe in love either. He didn't believe it was a real thing. It was a fake thing made by, music and movies and crocked up by people who made money on Valentine's Day and all this stupid stuff that he said and things. So he didn't even believe in love to do this. So the last week that he saw, he says, "I don't want to debate this week. I'm leaving, and I think I've heard what I need to hear from you and stuff. But I'm still not sure I believe in love. I'm definitely sure I don't believe in God. I know that I'm not prepared to go to your church, even if I was staying. But I will say this. If there's such a thing as a real Christian, you're probably him." And I know that just sounds like that it is self-affirming in a certain degree, but to get it to a kid to believe that doesn't believe in God doesn't even believe in love, that there's a possibility that there could be such a thing as a real Christian, well then he'll start with that and accept that. And I just thought, it was just another affirmation from God that I'm in the right place, doing the right thing, and saying things, but more than just what I'm saying, but my whole approach is such that people can see Jesus in the process, then I'm doing it the right way.
Yeah.
I got one more of these stories. I know we've gone over now.
Yeah, I mean, and then that we wrapped with this one because we kind of on the hour limit, so we don't want to be too long. So
Okay. This is my key story, because Lindsay was one of my little victory things and stuff. And this tells you a little bit about Gothic stuff. We talked a little bit more about evangelism in some ways than we have Goth's culture. I could do a long, boring lecture about all the elements, but this thing kind of decided it. So I'm running around with Vlad, who's finally stopped introducing me as the vampire slayer, and he's been introducing me to kids, and he pointed out a young lady who I thought was in her early 20s because of the way that young girls do makeup and everything else. She looked very mature to me in the goth thing, and turned out to be, I think, 15 when I first met her, going to this club. And he goes, her goth name was Lithia. They changed their name sometimes. And he says, oh yeah, Lithia's doing spells and ceremonies over there right now. And I'm going, really? What is that? And I went around and I watched a little bit of it, but then I'm going, I don't understand what she did. And he goes, well, Lithia's thing, one of her things is she likes to poke her finger and put some blood in a cup, and then have other people who want to in the circle. She had about 10, 15 people there. They poke their fingers and they put blood in it. Then she puts some herbs in it and says a spell, and then passes it around again. And the spell is supposed to help people become vampires. I thought, wow, this is a little more further out than I was ready for. I thought it was going to be about the music. I'm not sure what this kind of thing is about.
so I'm weird.
I'm going, this will be interesting. So Lindsay, Olivia at the time, was hanging out with one or two people. She'd just gotten to the thing and stuff. So it was probably a week or two later that I saw her, and she was alone, and I wanted to kind of approach her and go, Vlad told me about you, and he told me a little bit about this little ceremony you do, and I'm kind of interested in what that's about. And she gets a Jewish kind of attitude, 20-something like you, and she goes, well, I know you're that pastor guy going around, and you're just going to yell at me about demons and the occult and all of the spooky stuff, and you're going to freak out, and I don't want to talk about it and stuff. And I'm going, well, actually, that's not where I was coming from. And remember, this is the late 80s, early 90s, when this is going on.
Satanic praise.
It's, I'm I make that historical note because my concern was active at that point, and I'm going, I'm not really worried about the spell itself so much as how often do you do this? Because how often do you think you can drink shared blood and not get AIDS? And it stopped her dead cold.
They were drinking from the cup.
Yeah, because everybody was drinking from a shared cup, which they bled into. And so it didn't occur to her, as most teenagers think they're invulnerable, and that will, dying won't happen to me. And although Goths are more offensive about that issue. But I don't think it actually had occurred to her in the first place. And she goes, "Well, I take care of myself. It'll be all right." And I didn't I didn't press it, but I got planted an idea,
Yeah.
reasonable doubt, that what you're doing is the smart thing to do,
But
kind
also,
of thing.
as teenagers, we kind of, whoever wants to admit, we were all like this, isn't it? It's part of, you don't know.
Absolutely, absolutely. They're kind of oblivious to the dynamic, but I
But
wanted to
also,
get it over
as
my head.
teenagers, all of us, we refused to admit that we're not indestructible, isn't it?
She, I let her alone for a little while, but in the coming weeks, I approached her again, and she said, I said, "Well, how are you doing in all of this?" And she goes, she kind of did. I just really, uh, I know you're a pastor, and I know you're trying to get me to join the church, and you're this and you're that and the other. And I'm going, "Oh, that's very interesting," uh, because I came here to learn about Goss and befriend people and do all of this stuff. And your insistence is that I'm prejudiced and have prejudged what all Goss are and what they do and all of that stuff. And in the process of doing that, you just categorize me as one of those Christians, and you're like all the other Christians, and you just did to me what you accuse Christians of doing to you.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to rethink this whole approach to the thing. And she's going, "You're right, that was prejudice on my part, and I'm not going to do that anymore." And so ever after that, we started off being very tongue-in-cheek and being almost Shakespearean in our, or at least Victorian in our greetings. And for about a month, every time we'd see each other, I would come up and say, "How fares it with you, fair lady?" And she would go, "I am doing well, my lord." And she would hold her hand out and let me kiss it. And that's all the conversation we had for about a month and stuff. And then one day, she was hanging out with a bunch of friends and talking and doing stuff. And uh, she was one of these two that would grab a bunch of girls and they'd go off in a corner and read poetry to each other, even at the club. She did some dancing, but she really liked to share her poetry and stuff. And it turns out became a professional writer. But one day she was in one of those circles. I had just entered the parking lot kind of thing. She saw me and she ran out of the circle, gave me a big hug. "So glad you're here," and ran back to her room. That's all she did and all she said. And I went, I broke through. That's the moment I knew broke through. And stuff. We became very good friends during the Goth period, and she started coming to Sanctuary, to my Gothic side of Sanctuary for a while, with a boyfriend that she absolutely ended up hating. But he was a backslidden Christian, so he came with her too. But she came for quite a while, and it was while we were having a study in Revelations about end times things, which Goths like to talk about end times things and the end of the world and everybody's death and all that kind of
Who
stuff.
doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. So, um, so she talked about that. These days, and I talked to her later about all that, and I said, "Why did you break out at that time when you gave me a big hug?" And she goes, "Because I realized um, um, when you asked me the question about age, I realized you were probably the only adult in my life at that time, uh, but that cared whether I lived or died." And that became a crux in my understanding about doing this ministry. Lindsay, it turns out, it went back and forth through things, but she lives like 3 blocks from me. We reacquainted. Still loves me to pieces. I did her wedding last year, and we go every month to Barnes and Noble and talk about books and writing and stuff like that. And I call her my erstwhile daughter, and she calls me her faux pas. So I am a father figure to these kids, and it's delightful how long I've been able to keep these relationships with these kids just by uh,
It,
spending time developing trust in the
at the
beginning.
same time, it's like what we say is like what you, and it's not only like a faith thing, like it's general what impact you can have to someone's life. You will never, but just being like kind with them and love them, you'll never know, you know, how this, sometimes after like a lot of years, you come in full set, you meet them again. Sometimes you will never meet them, but you don't know in which conversation your name is propping up.
It does come up. Um, so again, I hope people got things out of this. It's more about uh, I know we've talked more about strategies or attitudes towards evangelism, but I think that's something that uh, people need to understand. It's why I'm part of Asylum. Didn't even get to that story with me and Billy, but uh, uh, it's why I continue uh, to approach ministry this way because my experience with people that the church doesn't always talk to has taught me a lot of things about how to make a difference in people's lives.
And I was saying this, we were doing a lot of training with the Salvation Army, and we were talking about, I don't remember what we were talking about. I was making a point, and taking within the Salvation Army context, the roots of the Salvation Army is like to go to the ones that the church kicking out. That's how the Salvation Army started, basically. And for me, doing this, within the metal scene, it's kind of like we going back like to the early Salvation Army days, like going after the ones that the church kicking out, like not like save them in this way, but kind of building those bridges again, showing them that they're not, they're not all Christians the same. There are the ones that they kind of look exactly like you, basically. They look more like you than the Christians that you don't like. So,
Uh, well, let me say too, in closing here and stuff, I made my living for a dozen years going around the country talking to youth groups and different groups about drugs, sex, and rock and roll. Wrote a book and did a couple of things back then and stuff. But to this day, I still have to say I did a couple of the youth conferences for the Salvation Army in America. And I got to say, I was never treated better more graciously uh, by any church or any particular denomination or group than I was the Salvation Army. They were just so freaking supportive and gracious and kind, and it's like they really legitimately operated out of the you know the minister by making sure somebody has a cup of cool water. They were always asking me if I was hungry, thirsty, if the room I got was quiet
it's nice
enough
to
for me
hear
to do
because
things. They just really ministered to the minister, and it was my favorite conferences was doing them with the Salvation Army.
mm, that's nice because especially in the States, the Salvation Army came under like a lot of judgment and a lot of scrutiny. But I mean, it was rightly so because they were going far to they start discriminating against like certain people, like in terms of the within the employment thing. But all those things have been dealt. That's one of the things I like with the Salvation Army. That when something is goes bad, it's been dealt and accountability is been like in place, so they don't just like brushing things under the carpet when they're coming into life. I mean, yeah. Uh, and the thing is that because I'm part of it, I have kind of become a little bit disillusioned as well because you see the organization from the inside and you see all the bad stuff as well. So, uh, But there are
Well, the
like,
ones I dealt with knew how to treat a guest and had the spirit of hospitality, and I really appreciate that.
yeah.
You'd be surprised how many churches hadn't a crew and stuff.
Okay.
It never occurred to them.
Probably because my in the UK, they're like a lot, like in general, most churches and good at it. I don't know. Anyway, so
But
thank you for
thank you for the
coming.
time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So it was episode 2, but for us was like nearly 2.5 hours. Earlier, so for the ones that they were watching the video, my son popped in, wanted to open him a jar of Nutella. He didn't know, so he popped it off camera. He handed me the bottle jar. I
I'm
did. So
surprised nobody's done me here and stuff because I got a grandbaby who can be quite loud. But seems she's taking her morning nap and we'll be okay.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
but appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for
Hopefully
coming.
this will
Enjoy the
be
stories, and for me, it
effective
was
for you.
this episode was a lot of you know sharing the stories from me. Says like from one side, showing to Christians that when you're dealing with subcultures and gods, don't be go with an open mind and an empty agenda. And for gods from the other side, like they're not all Christians the same. So probably someone close to you that is not like you think they are. And with this thought, I bid you goodbye. And let us know in the comments your thoughts, and remember to follow us. Until next time, guys. Bye.